Tennessee football is flying under the radar this offseason, most notably this week in Atlanta at SEC Media Days. Josh Ward on a Thursday this week, plus Throwback Thursday, one of the most interesting and best Tennessee football games that's never really talked about. All that and more, your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it, your Thursday morning Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Kane, a member of the VolQuest.com team here in town, covering Tennessee athletics on the Daily Beat, and of course, your host of Locked On Vols, free and available wherever you get your podcast. This is your number one spot for Tennessee football news and entertainment, weekday mornings when you wake up, again, free and available, and we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Every day, I appreciate you for being here. Got a treat, got a couple staples on the show today. Instead of Wednesday, because SEC Media Days was on Tuesday, I thought I'd record with Josh Ward a day later. So we got Josh Ward Thursday coming up here in segment number 1 in a matter of seconds. How did Tennessee perform at SEC Media Days? Where will Tennessee be predicted in the SEC preseason rankings? All that and more, MLB draft coverage, all that and more coming up with Josh Ward here in a matter of seconds. And then we got Throwback Thursday with Neyland Press Corp's Noah Taylor. We're dialing it back to 1950, and I feel like this game, obviously it was in 1950, right, about 75 years ago. I feel like this game's never talked about, but boy, one of the greatest games in all of Tennessee football history, and we're going to tell you exactly why coming up with Noah Taylor for Throwback Thursday in segments 2 and 3. All that and more here on your Thursday Locked On Vols. Yeah, it's going to be a fun show. So I'm going to get out of the way. Let's go ahead and talk with Josh Ward. We'll get his thoughts on SEC Media Days and so much more. Here's my conversation with Josh Ward. Josh Ward, Tennessee took its turn in the spotlight earlier in the week at SEC Media Days. Your overall impressions of Josh Heupel, Bryson Eason, Miles Kitselman, Arion Carter, any of the big takeaways you had from Tennessee and Atlanta for SEC Media Days?
I thought Tennessee came in confident, talking about what its goals are. Tennessee went to the playoff last year, and despite questions about Tennessee's football team, the topic of the quarterback position, the inexperience on the offensive side, the expectation internally is to get back to the college football playoff and to go compete with every team on the schedule. And a lot of people think that Tennessee will have a chance to do that in terms of competing with every team, but getting back to 10-2 or better is going to come with some obvious challenges. But Tennessee expects it to happen. I think that's a reminder of the place Josh Heupel and his coaching staff have put Tennessee in the last few years, where they've recruited at a high level. They've won a lot of big games, and they're not going to be intimidated by playing the big teams that they will in the schedule this year.
I heard a lot of things yesterday that, again, it's talking season, it's July. I mean, a lot of this stuff doesn't matter. I get all that. But, I mean, that just kind of fired me up, right? I mean, Josh Heupel referencing he didn't call it this, but referencing getting their tail whipped against Ohio State in the college football playoffs, saying that, hey, we're not just happy to be there. We're using that as motivation. We have a sour taste in our mouth. We're training to avenge that moment, essentially, is kind of what I took out of that. So that fired me up a little bit. And, hearing Miles Kitselman talk about, and I talked about this on the show yesterday, and I'm sure everybody listening is getting tired of it, but just something as simple as a freshman and Jack Van Dorselaer calling out a senior and Miles Kitselman having his hands on his hips, because Kitselman preaches that in the tight end room. When we're tired, we don't put our hands on our hips. He had his hands on his hips. Van Dorselaer smacks him away, says we don't do that at Tennessee. I mean, that is a true freshman bowing up to a 6-year senior or whatever it is. I mean, that screams culture to me. Does culture win games? Not always, but culture helps with adversity. I don't know. I just little things about yesterday I heard that just kind of told me or just reinforced the idea that, man, Tennessee's got a pretty tight knit group as a football team.
Yeah, culture helps keep things together. I think that's true and can apply here as we're talking about the turnover, because I think part of the offseason conversation is, okay, who helps step up as a leader? Kitselman coming back is really important in that regard, because Dylan Sampson is gone. Again, there's the quarterback situation. There's no obvious leader right now because a starter hasn't even been named. So guys having to play their roles, somebody like Kitselman coming back, Arion Carter on defense, Bryson Eason on the defensive line, showing young guys how it's done and making sure they're comfortable when it's time for them to speak up in that instance, as you're talking about, that they're willing to do it as well. Yes, they have to go out and make plays. You know that, everybody knows. Against Georgia, they don't just go out and win the game because the culture is good, because Georgia's culture You can make all the off-field comments, but on the field and in the locker room and in the weight room, Georgia has it where it needs to be. Going to Alabama, you got to go make plays. You don't just show up and win because everybody is in line together. But everybody being in line together helps when you need to push on the practice field, push in the weight room to get better and go make plays. And then, of course, the coaching staff has its role in getting those guys prepared. But the status of the program, the standard that's expected inside, I think is for real.
Where's Tennessee going to be picked preseason whenever the media picks that coming up tomorrow, later in the week?
Well, I don't think it'll be in the top half. We'll see if that's the case or not. There is a big jumble of teams, I think, once you get beyond Texas, Georgia, LSU, Alabama. But I'll be curious how Tennessee compares to Florida, to Oklahoma, two teams that are on Tennessee's schedule, two teams that have brutal schedules, talking about the Gators and the Sooners, but also a good amount of talent. Where is Auburn? That's a team that I think a lot of people have differing opinions on heading into this year. Texas A&M as well with year 2 of Mike Elko. But if I had to guess, I would guess somewhere in the 8 to 10 range in the SEC. So I guess 8 is top half because it's a 16-team league now, but somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I would man, I'd honestly be surprised if Tennessee is 8 or anything lower. I think Tennessee's going to be 9th or 10th, and not necessarily that I'm thinking that's about right. I think from a national perspective, especially a lot of people that are going to be voting on this, they don't do their homework. But even if you do your homework, you're seeing everything that Tennessee's been missing and the transition of Nico Iamaleava. Like, I get all that. I think I get it. I still think, since we're in here on the weeds, I know this roster. I like this roster, but you're right. There's going to be a jumble of those teams right there with Florida, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas,
South
A&M.
Carolina. Like a South Carolina is going to benefit from Lenore Sellers, which I'm not even saying is incorrect. I'm also I'm not sure with voting how much schedule is taken into account. Tennessee benefits from its schedule because I think the bottom 4 teams in the predicted order of finish will all be on Tennessee's schedule. Could be wrong there, but Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt, I think, will be in some order the bottom 4 teams in the predicted order of finish. Tennessee's not guaranteed to win those games, but losing any of those 4 would be a bad loss, really bad loss, I think, this season. So that gets you to 4-0. Can you go 1-3 in the other 4? That gets you to 5-3, and that has you somewhere in the 4 to 8 or 9 range in the SEC. Last year there was, I believe, a 6-way tie at 5-3. So there are a lot of teams that are very similar, and I think that'll be the case heading in. But because of Tennessee's quarterback position, I think with your question of how the media will predict things, I think that will knock Tennessee down. If Nico were coming up, Tennessee would be picked higher.
Last offseason, I called LSU the media darling. I thought everybody was loving on LSU too much, giving LSU so much credit, this, that, and the other, and I didn't quite understand it. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like LSU's not getting talked enough about this year from an SEC landscape here. I'm a huge Nussmeier fan. I know he turns the football over a little bit, but the dude is just like Brett Favre out there just slinging it. Okay? You're bringing back a ton in the backfield. You're bringing back a ton at wide receiver. You're bringing back Whit Weeks, who I think is a phenomenal football player. I think LSU's kind of flying under the radar, and it feels like to me LSU's not in that upper echelon of the Texas, Georgia, Alabamas, but it should be.
I think it should be. I think that's your top 4 going in. What they bring back plus what they add at wide receiver, I think Nussmeier is a really good player. I think he's potentially the best quarterback in the SEC this year. There are several that can make that claim. Lagway, Manning, Sellers could potentially be that, but Nussmeier absolutely could be the best quarterback in the league by the end of the season and a first-round pick in the NFL draft. And their schedule's not going to be easy. And I know he has his faults. Brian Kelly's still a good coach, weird fit, kind of just a weird fit no matter where he is probably, but because of who he is. But he can still coach football, and they still have really good players, and they invested in getting this team right for this upcoming season because the expectation is still as high as it gets when we talk about LSU. So I think that there's a big 4 going in. Again, choose the order. I would probably start with Texas, but Texas, Georgia, LSU, and Bama. I think those are the 4 best teams in the league going in. And I think for those who are not ready to put LSU there, it's because of 2 years ago they had a Heisman winner and such explosion in that passing game, and they still lost 3 games. But I think they'll be better. I think they have a really good chance to be a playoff team.
Yeah, that was a lot of my basis on. It was like you had a Heisman Trophy winner, and you had two NFL receivers, and Brian Kelly still only won 9 games. So like kind of what gives in that regard.
Yeah, but we'll find out early. We'll find out in the first half of the season which direction at least LSU season can go, because there's the opener at Clemson. There's a game against Florida, a game against Ole Miss. I believe I'm right in that, with their first 5 games on the schedule. So it's a tough draw early for LSU.
Out the door, Josh. We appreciate you joining us here on a Thursday this week, so we can talk a little bit about Tennessee and SEC Media Days. We've done that. Sunday nights, Monday all day. Man, Tennessee once again dominated every area of the draft you want to look at. Current players, Tennessee fared very well with signees. You were going to lose a couple no matter what. Had a couple of transfer portal guys that were selected that I thought would make it to campus, but nonetheless, I thought Tennessee dominated the Major League Baseball draft, and to have Tony Vitello up there once again on the set for MLB Network, it truly was a 4 to 5 hour infomercial for the Tennessee baseball program on Sunday night. Your overall thoughts of Tennessee in the Major League Baseball draft?
Yeah, Tony Vitello doesn't need much help in recruiting, but boy, that had to help, right? With the success of the players that he's coached, getting that kind of opportunity in the NFL draft. Their transfer class last year showing up in the first round is a big deal moving forward. And it's also just a reminder where the program is to produce that kind of MLB talent. And Tony Vitello to be on the stage there with that going on, and he has been the last couple of years, it also gives us a peek into why he's such a good recruiter. And I think we know that with the personality that he has, but the player development to go with that, it's just huge for the program. So Tennessee's going to be really good again in 2026. They will have a shot to get back to the College World Series and compete for a title again. But I thought this past week just reminded us, not that too many people had forgotten, but that Tennessee is a major program. It is up there with the best. LSU has 2 national titles in the last 3 seasons. So if you went with the belt topic, LSU has the belt. They're literally the champs. But Tennessee baseball is up there with every top program. LSU, Florida, Arkansas, Texas. You know who the top programs are. Tennessee is in that class, and they're near the top of that class right now.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're allowed to follow all the action, right? You're already following all the action, so why not make it more thrilling with the watch? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while some of your friends, some of your family members, they might be on vacation or something. You could be at home watching these games and put some coin in your pocket. New daily promotions over at FanDuel Sportsbook, making the favorite matchups even more interesting. You got futures coming up with the college football season just right around the corner. Practice is beginning in less than 2 weeks. Totals are out there, Heisman odds, so much more. Plus, you've got you got golf on the weekends, Major League Baseball, and the All-Star break right now. But hey, that home run derby, that was fun a couple of nights ago. Those are a few of the things that I look for every single night, even in the month of July over at FanDuel Sportsbook, and you can as well. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel Sportsbook app today, or check it all out at FanDuel.com to go ahead and get started. FanDuel is where you can make every single moment more. FanDuel. Noah Taylor is on for our Throwback Thursday segment. He is the owner-operator of Neyland Press Corp. You can subscribe on Substack. He does some great work over there, a couple stories every single week, and is very active on social media. Noah, today let's focus on the 1950. I'm acting like I'm setting the lesson plan here. You told me what we're going to talk about. 1950, Tennessee, Kentucky. And if you're listening or watching right now, you're probably just like, who the flippin' cares, right? 1950, especially when I tell you the final score was 7-0. It's like snoozer, right? But this game was interesting in a number of different areas we're going to go over here in the next couple of minutes. First and foremost, the stage leading into it. Like, all Kentucky had to do to claim a national championship that year was beat Tennessee, right? And then you would go to a bowl game or whatever, but even if you lost that, they'd probably still claim it. But like, the only thing standing in the way of a national championship for Kentucky that year, and head coach Bear Bryant, was beating Tennessee. Tennessee had lost 2 games earlier in the season. They had won 9 or 10 in a row or whatever, and I guess my math's off or whatever, but they had lost some earlier games. They were on a big winning streak. They needed to beat Kentucky, and then, of course, Vanderbilt, and then they were going to go to the Sugar Bowl. But nonetheless, it was 2 really, really good teams playing some good football at the time, and the stage was set there in Knoxville. And we'll get about the conditions here in a moment, but it was two really, really good teams heading into that Saturday.
Yeah, it absolutely was, and I think one of the best wins of the Neyland era for Tennessee. Probably the most high stakes Tennessee Kentucky game that there's been, mostly because Kentucky hasn't been in the running for a national title or come close to that since then. But it really a tale as old as time. Kind of a whatever promising season that Kentucky had or trajectory they were on, Tennessee kind of ruins it for them. We've seen that a lot, and that was certainly the case in 1950. One of those kind of classic Neyland Bear Bryant battles. Obviously, we didn't get to see that happen when Bear Bryant goes on to Alabama and has the run that he had, particularly in the 70s. To stake the claim, it is certainly one of the greatest coaches of all time. But for all his accolades, he never beat Neyland, and I think that gnawed at him in his coaching career. There's a Bryant quote that's been used a lot. You see it a lot during the week of that Tennessee-Alabama game every year, kind of resurface on social media. But, he had said at one point that people think, I'm the greatest damn coach that's ever been. But, I learned everything. I was taught everything by General Neyland. And this is kind of one of those games where he kind of, I think, used what he learned from Neyland in that loss and kind of applied it throughout the rest of his career. But so it's a big game from that standpoint, and how it kind of changed, I think, Bryant's approach as a coach. But yeah, Kentucky unbeaten, like you said, going into the final game of the regular season. Number 3 in the major polls. Tennessee was number 9. Obviously, had the loss to Mississippi State, who was unranked in week 2.
Okay, so one loss. My bad. For some reason, I was thinking they had 2 losses, only 1 loss.
Yeah. So they had kind of an upset loss in week 2 to Mississippi State and Starkville. But Tennessee was, like you said, the only thing standing in the way of Kentucky in a national championship. And you kind of touched on it there with the conditions, but to make it a little more interesting, 14 inches of snow were dumped on Knoxville the day before. So, that snow had to be shoveled off the field before the game. On the day of the game, fans kind of went down to Gay Street and cleaned out the stores for hats and scarves to get as bundled up as they could. One guy even bought out as many hats as he could and went outside the gates and sold them for profit outside
Smart
the stadium.
man. Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to make a buck. Yeah.
Yeah, and he probably did pretty well that day. But yeah, it's fun, going over the newspaper archives for this story, and you read about not just the conditions and how everybody bundled up, but the Knoxville News Sentinel reported that there were hundreds of gallons worth of whiskey consumed that day. Said most fans were orderly. You didn't really run into any problems. One guy kind of got passed out. Police put him in the back of a squad car and cranked up the heater, and then they went and watched the game. So that's about the only thing you ran into. And then, Shields Watkins Field, this is before it was called Neyland Stadium, obviously. It held over 50,000 people, but about 45,000 showed up. I think there were 7,000 empty seats. Obviously, a lot of fans didn't want to brave the conditions, which is, kind of hard to believe for a top 10 clash, but I think understandable too. And then scalpers ticket prices had dropped for them to about $1.50 before kickoff. So they took a hit for this game, but it's kind of hard to believe. I think now Tennessee fans would certainly brave anything to show up. They went to Columbus, Ohio a couple months ago to see that game, and it was about as cold as this.
Well, it wasn't, but it certainly felt like it. I mean, you were there. Like, it was what, 18, 19 degrees at kickoff?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so this was 5 degrees, correct?
Right. Yeah.
And you in your article you said then record low temps. Now, I assume that was for Knoxville, or was that record low? Because I can't imagine there being a colder football game. This has got to be probably one of this has got to be the coldest football game in the history, right? Even more than that Cotton Bowl that year.
Yeah, according to the News Sentinel, it was the coldest, and still, I believe, stands as the coldest November day in Knoxville.
Oh, okay.
Certainly, there's been colder days. I think, was a couple weeks, was it 2 years ago in January, where it just seemed like we were iced over for a couple
Well, it's
weeks.
funny because y'all were iced over here and stuck in the houses. Me and the wife were actually in the Dominican Republic for so I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm drinking. It's like 88, 90 degrees, and I'm just sitting here scrolling on my phone and seeing all the snow at home. I'm like, sucks to suck. I mean, I'm just sitting. But anyway, yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, and then then you get to the game, and I think that weather certainly played a factor into maybe how it played out. Kentucky fans still contend that maybe if the weather had been a little bit better, that they would have won the game. But one thing that jumped out to me, and I tried to highlight this in the story, was really the brutality of it. Man, I think one thing that was interesting was guys just coming in droves to longtime Tennessee football trainer Mickey O'Brien after that game, and you're reading about bloody noses, broken noses, cracked ribs, dislocated shoulders, and when you factor in the weather and the temperatures, you kind of cringe reading that about what that would be like. And remember, this is the era before face masks too, so pretty brutal game in the way that it was played. Um, but it was just that kind of game. And even Neyland, the guy, who just a few years before this had gotten back from World War II, he said, there was one quote about, the guys are really cracking each other out there, and he hadn't seen a football game like that in quite a while. So even by 1950 standards, it seemed pretty brutal in the way that
He
it
was
was played.
Neyland himself, not himself, but he had trainers. But everything I've read and heard about General Neyland, like this kind of surprised me when I read it. Like he was having trainers run hand warmers out there to his
Yeah.
players. Like, you know, it seems like he would think that's soft, but like
Yeah.
it was so brutally cold that day that he was even having to, try to do what he could do to make it better for his players.
Yeah, I mean, it paid off, I think, for Tennessee. He took it a little bit more seriously than Bear Bryant did. Bear Bryant, a few weeks before that, Kentucky had played Florida in Lexington, and it was cold, and Florida players bundled up extra, which you'd probably expect for guys who probably weren't used to that temperature. But
No.
Tennessee killed them. I think the score was like 40-7, and that was a good Florida team in 1950. And Bear Bryant had said that, I thought that the fact that they had worn the extra layers made them a little bit slower. He didn't want to make the same mistake playing Tennessee. So really, the only thing that Kentucky came prepared for was the ice. They thought, well, if the field was iced over, he packed like 40 something pairs of basketball shoes for them to play in, to switch into instead of cleats to
But,
help them kind of.
explain. Okay, Michael Scott right here. Like, explain this to me like I'm 5. Okay, I'm not the smartest guy. I don't claim to be, but I understand ice is ice. Why do you think playing in sneakers would be better than playing in cleats, where you could at least try to dig in? I didn't understand that. Again, I'm stupid, but tell me where I'm wrong here.
Well, I mean, I guess his thinking was if it had been slick enough that maybe the cleats wouldn't be able to dig into the ground, and maybe that would have played a factor. Maybe the basketball would have had better traction if the field was harder. I imagine the ground was pretty hard, but it really worked in the favor. The snow actually helped the day before. Obviously, they shoveled it off for the game, but it prevented that kind of ice the field from icing over. Kind of provided a blanket for it, I guess.
No.
So I imagine it was still pretty hard if you're getting thrown down into it throughout that game, the way that the guys had reported on it. But I guess the snow had saved it from completely icing over the playing surface.
Man, my playing days don't compare. I'm gonna make this all about me real quick, if you'll allow it. Division 2. Not even a above average starter here, but even in high school, like you have these mild concussions where you go and you take a hit or you deliver a hit, or my favorite, which was not my favorite at her, was when you bang your head on the ground and it's just all black for like 2 or 3 seconds. And back in the day it was like, come on, get up there. I mean, now it's like, whew, but you got some type of concussion right now. Let's take a seat here for a minute. But like the ground, the turf. I mean, I have my high school football helmet's out in the garage over here, and like I could go get it right now. There's still a turf stain on my helmet from where I banged my head against the turf at Dobbins Bennett High School my senior year. Like, I couldn't even imagine just repeatedly hitting that frozen tundra, time after time after time. I mean, God, goodness gracious, that's brutal. So, short break. Let's come back. Let's talk about the game, because the game's only highlight was in the second quarter. I mean, this game was full of about what you'd expect, sloppiness, but it's what it kind of made it all the better even at the end. So more with Noah Taylor and Neyland Press Corps. It is Throwback Thursday here on Locked On Vols, highlighting Tennessee's 7-0 win over Bear Bryant's Kentucky Wildcats back in 1950. Don't go anywhere. More of this coming up next. So you've got a frozen tundra, 14 inches of snow the night before. You got a Kentucky quarterback that not 16,000 yards passing, but gosh, it felt like it that year, right? I mean, he threw for about over 1,600, 23 touchdowns. I mean, he was a stud. The conditions were not favorable for him. He threw 4 picks in the game. Tennessee threw 2 picks. Kentucky fumbled. Noah, correct me if I'm wrong here. I want to say 7 times. Tennessee fumbled like 8 times, lost 4 of them. My point is, turnovers were aplenty when you think about it. It's expected, the field conditions. Tennessee's only highlight was in the second quarter, but again, by game's end, it was just kind of like, who's going to be the last team standing? And with the stakes so high, specifically for Kentucky, that's what makes this game so monumental. Sure, it wasn't the prettiest of games, but the outcome being Tennessee's favor prevented a national championship outright, at least, for the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah, Vito Perilli, who was nicknamed Babe, the quarterback for Kentucky in that game, he was a Heisman finalist. You mentioned some of the yards there. I mean, for 1950, that's pretty prolific.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and it was a Kentucky team that I think had scored like 360 points combined in their previous 9 games that year. So a really good offense coming in. And here's something that's interesting. General Neyland used Emmett Lowry, who was the Tennessee men's head basketball coach, as the scout for this game. And if you could kind of imagine today, Josh Heupel approaching Rick Barnes to go spend some of his spare time to watch film or maybe drive up to Lexington and scout a quarterback. But the guy turned out, and Neyland praised him after the game, that Emmett Lowry had been kind of the difference for them in his scout.
And I love the quote in there. Sorry to cut you off, but the quote, and I'm not trying to diminish his role or anything, but the quote from Neyland, I guess this was after the game, when he was praising him, he was like, yeah, he told us, the only way we're going to beat Kentucky is if we rush the quarterback. Well, no crap, right? But he was the key to their success, obviously, because he was a Heisman finalist.
Yeah, it made him it made Perilli really uncomfortable, I think, not being able to have the time. And you're right, it seems pretty obvious that would be a key to doing, and maybe something that's easier said than done. But apparently Tennessee got to him, and I think Neyland knew, which I thought was really interesting. And I got to credit Bob Gilbert's book, biography, really, on General Neyland on this, because I really leaned heavily into that as well. But Neyland had obviously written a lot of post-game journals about what worked, what didn't work. And for this game specifically, he knew that Kentucky relied so much on Perilli's passing game that they had absolutely no shot, even in the cold, to rely on their run game. And you mentioned it there. Obviously, the turnovers, the fumbles, rushing the quarterback, it was a factor in him throwing so many interceptions in that game. Kentucky rushed for 36 total yards in this game. You'd think with that weather that maybe they would put a little more emphasis on that coming into the game. But Neyland kind of wrote in his journal that Bryant didn't account for that, and that may be one of those things that maybe later on in Bryant's career he kind of learned from playing against Neyland.
Another thing too that you put in there that was from, I don't know if it's from his biography, or I don't know if it was from a Knoxville News Sentinel or Journal piece, but whatever it was, Neyland in the post-game journal wrote, they had monetary success with the tackle eligible, but did not, essentially, what the positive didn't outweigh the time it spent to perfect that, right? Like, it was a little successful, but like the time they went into perfecting that kind of negated anything they had. I thought that was hilarious. He was like, Bryant doesn't know the percentages. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that was a great part too. And I'd love to get, see some of those journals and that writing, because he seemed pretty excited. I don't know if Bear Bryant ever got his hands on those and maybe learned from them later on in his career. But that was, you're right, that was pretty funny, especially the percentages part. He seemed to highlight that. But you're right. It was a sloppy game. 17 combined turnovers between two teams. And the lone highlight, it came in the second quarter, like you mentioned. The difference was Hank Loricella. He hit Burt Rechichar in the end zone for a 27-yard touchdown. Now, I posted on my Twitter, I was able to find a clip of that play, and it was pretty phenomenal throw. You talk about sitting in the cold, frigid temps, which fans, I'm sure, Tennessee fans anyway, afterwards felt it was worth it. But that throw alone was pretty impressive. And Rechichar is a guy who, obviously want to have a great career with the Baltimore Colts, but also later that spring was a big factor in Tennessee making it to the College World Series championship final in '51,
Yep.
which was the last time they had gotten there until obviously last year when they won it all in Omaha. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, Kentucky, they kind of went on to say, I think it was in the Kentucky yearbook later that year that, maybe if the temps had been different, Pirelli wouldn't have been held down as much as he had. But regardless, regardless of the weather, whatever it was, Tennessee made the plays when it counted the most and won that game 7-0 and dashed Kentucky's greatest season that they have not been able to get close to since then.
So Tennessee goes on in the Cotton Bowl?
Yeah.
Okay. Tennessee goes on, beats Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Texas coach was actually at that game to scout Kentucky, ended up playing Tennessee. Tennessee beats Texas in the Cotton Bowl. You have Kentucky going on to beat number 1 Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl. Tennessee has one loss. Kentucky has one loss. Out the door here, we don't have much time left, but both teams actually claimed national championships, right? And I get it from Kentucky's angle, right? But Tennessee went on to claim a national championship, but it wasn't until in the 1990s when they kind of went back and kind of studied with a computer algorithm. But one of the 6 national championships is actually claimed, and one of them is 1950.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think, like you said, they kind of went back and retroactively added it. Obviously, the 51 team, Tennessee goes and wins it won the consensus title the following year. Lost to Maryland in the Sugar Bowl, I believe. But won, obviously beat Texas, who at the time was number 3. And that, another really good game, another pretty impressive game. Tennessee scored first, Texas scored twice in the second quarter, led that game 14-7 going into the fourth. Tennessee goes down and scores in the fourth quarter to pull within 1, and the kicker missed the extra point that would have tied it. And in that same book, a great Neyland quote, when the kicker came back to the sideline, Neyland saw he was pretty dejected, pulled him aside and said, "Don't worry about it, son. We didn't come here to tie." And Tennessee's able to go down, and Hank Lorcella, the guy who was the hero of that Kentucky game, excuse me, not Hank Lorcella, Andy Kozar, who was one of the guys that got beat up pretty bad in that Kentucky game, I should say, with a broken nose. He punches it in from the 1-yard line for the go-ahead score. Tennessee beats Texas 20-14, and like you said, in 1990, when they go back and put in these new computer rankings, had Tennessee splitting that title. So I think beating Kentucky that year kind of maybe outweighed that Mississippi State loss early, and then beating a top 3 Texas team in the Cotton Bowl, really in Texas's backyard, certainly makes Tennessee feel like that's a pretty legitimate claim for them as one of their 6 titles.
Again, I felt like we've kind of covered your story as much as we could. Obviously, there's still more meat on that bone. Go check it out. Subscribe on Substack to Neyland Press Corps. There is a quote from General Neyland at the very end of your story. I'm not going to say it on here, but it's freaking hilarious, okay? And then there's another quote in there. I forgot, again, which publication it's from. I'm sorry. Journal, Sentinel, one of maybe the book. I don't know. But essentially saying, paraphrasing, all these guys had broken noses, broken ribs, hurt shoulders, all that, but all would play next week, and none were super sustaining big-time injuries.
Yeah.
It's like these guys were men. I mean, men. So really, really good stuff over there at Neyland Press Corps. Great conversation there with Noah Taylor, Neyland Press Corps, his Substack. Go ahead and give it a follow. Seriously, it's great stuff. He writes a couple of stories every single week, and he's chronicling history like it's in real time. It's really, really neat. Going back and finding old articles from the Knoxville News Sentinel, the Knoxville Journal, getting these quotes, and always, applying credit where credit's due, right? But, accumulating that in one spot. And I find it a really, really cool read each and every week. So he's got a Substack, Neyland Press Corps. Go ahead and check it all out there. And, of course, we welcome Noah onto the show every Thursday for Throwback Thursday in Tennessee football history. Going to continue that on into the season as well, looking back at some of the more memorable Tennessee games with its opponent each week right here on Locked On Vols. Josh Ward as well in segment number 1. It's been a busy week. Tennessee down at SEC Media Days earlier in the week. We'll find out where Tennessee is preseason picked coming up sometime tomorrow. We'll kind of give our thoughts on tomorrow's show right here on Locked On Vols and getting you set for the weekend and another week of Tennessee athletics. All that and more coming up tomorrow right here on Locked On Vols. Everydayers, thank you so much for being here. Same time, same place. We'll do it again tomorrow. This is Locked On Vols.